Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Welcome back to the second part of the conclusion of this podcast with apartment specialist Andrew Murray. We go on to talk about body corps, leaky apartments and opportunities because of this, and what he sees as a good net yield. We hope you enjoy today's interview. Body corps is a thing that a lot of people don't really know what they are, what they include.
Yep.
Are they all the same for different apartments? Are they good value for money?
Okay, so a lot of people find it difficulty or have difficulty understanding the body corporate fee. When you actually look at it and if it's all done correctly, really you've just got a whole lot of owners who are all putting money into the pot to look after that one building. So it's like you have a house and, you know, you've got a lot of people putting in money to make sure it's painted, make sure it's always looked after, make sure the lawns are mowed and all that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, if you own a house, how much would you spend on it a year to keep it in top-notch condition? So the body corporate fee, when run well, is exceptional. I love it. I don't have to worry about taking out the rubbish. I've got a rubbish room, someone collects it. I don't have to worry about insurance. I don't have to worry about, I've got a building manager. I don't have to worry about anything. So it's a body corporate fee and how when it's run correctly is great. Now, the big question is, where you asked is there a difference between companies? And yes, there are, but it's not actually about the body corporate company. Yes, there are ones out there that I have seen do things or are doing things that I don't agree with, and I think you can probably see through what I'm saying there. But it really comes down to how good is the committee. Because at the end of the day, a body corporate company is actually it's an administration company to make sure your company is, so your complex is being run correctly. So the problem is they take direction from the owners committee. Now the owners committee, most owners, they don't actually know much about. It's somebody who's, say, for example, a teacher or whatever, a lawyer or whoever comes on to an owners committee, and they're expected to make decisions on the maintenance of a lift, or, okay, is this person who is cleaning the complex charging the right, the right amount? How are they supposed to know? It's outside their expertise. So when it comes to a body corporate, it's really making sure how good is the owners committee, because they're the ones who are really, okay, if you don't have a good owners committee, that means things can get through that shouldn't get through. Charges can get through that shouldn't get through. Preferred, service agreements from a body corporate can get used when you could probably get cheaper elsewhere, that kind of thing. So really the body corporate company is irrelevant if you've got a great owners committee. And having said that, then if you don't have a great owners committee, yes, the body corporate company does matter.
Right,
it kind of answers the question without answering a question, unfortunately. But it's if you ever have any one of your clients, you can just flick me an email and I can give you a rundown on what it is. But
I know you can get the last minutes and stuff of meetings and all those good things. Well, what's the best way for them actually to check you out? Because as you said, there are different body corps from apartment to apartment. What's the best way they can, apart from ringing you, what's the best way they can actually establish themselves?
Otherwise, I'd be having calls 24/7 and not getting paid for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so basically, the best way for them is to realise that a pre-contractual disclosure, which came in with the Unit Titles Act in 2010, which was in May, now that had the right intentions. That was something that said, okay, if you're coming into this building, it's going to declare if there's any claims on the building and if there's any weather-type claims and things like that.
Yeah.
That's the first document you're given, and you're given as a purchaser, and you can't go into contract without it. Now, the intentions by Parliament were correct, but unfortunately it wasn't executed well. So basically what I'm saying is that's not worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why I say that is because you can have a building that's had issues, but it didn't claim because either the developer's gone bust or it's gone outside its warranty period. So it's saying, yes, there's been no weather type claims, on this building. So you're thinking, oh yeah, it's fine. When really it's only because there's been nobody claiming it. So a pre-contractual disclosure, other than it telling you things like, what's the contingency fund, which is what's called your sinking fund, which is the amount of money your body corporate has to play with in regards to improvements, etc. It's kind of like your backup fund, and what your actual body corporate levy is. It's a complete waste of time. You have to go into your minutes, and you want to be reading at least 2 years body corporate minutes. Any further back than that, it's kind of really irrelevant. So 2 years, absolutely compulsory. Read through them with a fine-tooth comb, and then. Okay, that still doesn't give you it. And this is where I'm probably not helping you, because this is where there is a little bit more due diligence that's needed. And that's where what I'd actually ask, and what I always do when I'm purchasing, is I go, can I speak to somebody on the committee? Okay. And that's something nobody does, and they should every time. Because with a committee, they're dealing with the issues right now. And as you know, they can be dealing with something now, and the issues could occur, but they haven't been published yet. Now, that's what I'm giving you a solution for, is to cover your bases 100%.
Yeah.
Now, but in most cases, going through the minutes and looking at anything there that raises alarm bells, making sure your lawyer goes through those minutes is probably the best way to do it, and is going to keep you covered. But just to be aware that pre-contractual disclosure, if it says everything's fine, is just don't even rely on it.
Great. What a great tip that is. You speak to someone on the committee after you read the minutes. They can further explain what's really going on. Yeah,
in most cases it'll be fine, but it's just to cover 100%. I've just seen cases where if they did that, they would have been aware, and things would have occurred. Anyway,
yeah, no, that's great. And, I mean, a lot of people, they don't go to apartments because they look at the body corp and go, oh, it's just another damn expense they have to have along the way. But as you went through, they don't have to. That includes your maintenance. It includes things like rubbish, but insurance and repair of the building if it's run correctly. So it can actually eliminate a lot of those extra expenses you should be putting in your cash flow analysis before they buy.
Yeah, absolutely. If you looked at what you'd spend on a house if it was tenanted to keep it in tip-top shape, and I don't mean, okay, I'll let it go for 5 years and then I'll give it a paint job, but actually keeping it looking good the whole time, you're going to be spending a couple of $1,000s a year pretty comfortably.
Definitely.
And that's just the nature of it. So it's people understanding that body corporate fee is actually necessary. The biggest component in that body corporate fee is the insurance, and which is something in case, especially because of the Canterbury situation, and then the rest is building management, and then you've got your individual contracts depending on how large the complex is. But it's also a safety mechanism, because if there's an issue, you're going to be sharing it with how many owners? Up to 500 owners. So, for example, if you have $1 million issue, $1 million sounds huge, but when you're splitting it between 500 owners, it's actually not that much.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've seen that close hand. So, right, we'll move on to one of the most common topics spoken of apartments, the leaky issues. But I'm going to take a different stance than most would think. I'm going to go to the extra side of it now. With many apartments now have had leaky issues. They have been fixed. Is it too soon to sort of say how that is, or in your opinion, is an apartment building that has been fixed from a leaky issue worth purchasing?
An apartment building that's already been fixed is the safest out there, and that may sound really weird because often it comes with a stigma. How you look at it, once it's been fixed, it's had to have its code of compliance done by the council. Now, the council, first time around in the early 2000s, they're getting taken to the cleaners. And that's because when they did their checks, they didn't do them, or they didn't do them well. Or in some cases, I don't even know how they did them because they can't have checked it from what I was thinking. Yeah. So what it's mean is they've come in now with a fine-tooth comb, and it's almost to the extreme. So when you have something that's gone through a leaky period and then been fixed and been done properly, and I don't mean a patch job, I mean like complete reclad, you're dealing with an apartment complex that's probably safer than any other one out there. So that's actually something you should be very, very comfortable with because of the steps and the hoops you now have to go through. And I'm talking in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Now, when one's going into a leaky situation or is currently a leaky situation, you want to look at how that's being handled. What is the long term, i.e., are they going to be making this building it's a great opportunity to make this building, or the building complex look better, be done better, and go through that process where you know there's going to be warranties in place, it's going to be top notch. It may have a $20,000, $30,000 extra levy, but that means that you're going to get the deal of the century. The reason why is because the majority of the market won't touch it because they're losing money not through fact, they're losing money through fear. So leaky buildings, I give advice to people. One person who's just bought 9 in one leaky building because I know once it's finished, there's about $100,000 margin in every single one, and while they purchase it, it's at a lower price, so the return's through the roof.
Yeah.
So leaky buildings are probably one of the best opportunities out there. It's just making sure that how the repairs are being done effectively, i.e. it's not getting stuck in litigation, which means nothing gets done and stuff gets worse. But if litigation's involved to see if they think they're going to win the case, that's been doing in conjunction while they fix the building. Not waiting to see if they get a win while nothing happens and you stick around for 5 years and your apartment's unsellable. So it all comes down to how is that situation being managed, and different body corporate companies do it differently, and that's I can point out quite a few buildings where I think it's a screamer video, and that's purely because of majority of the people go, oh, there's a leaky problem, I won't go near that. Well, that means opportunity.
Absolutely, yeah. The old problem plus solution equals opportunity all the way to the bank. In fact, just going on for that, one of the things to check that I've seen in a few apartments lately, and I suppose it's more important when you're buying at mortgagee auction or even auction, is through the body corp also, if it has been a building that's been repaired, is checking is there any outstanding debt with that particular unit. And I've seen a couple where they're taking on a $45,000 debt for buying it, but that still might be a good buy because it has been completed, and if it has been completed properly, as you just alluded to, that could still work. And as part of it, it's certainly something to be checking if it has had a repair to make sure that you're not going into it for a $50,000 debt you don't know about.
Yeah, and that's where, unfortunately, auction, even in the auction, it does not. It's got two downsides, both for the vendor and for the purchaser. From auctions with apartments are not the best way to sell or buy. The reason why through buying is they only disclose what they have to disclose. So that's your pre-contractual disclosure. And it means you can't go in with the conditions to do your own investigation. And you can't just go from apartment to apartment spending thousands of dollars on going through that, and the campaigns are so short. And I've seen even real estate agents come in and purchase a building and ring me up and go, mate, that's got issues, didn't you know that? And I lost $100,000. And I go, but I got it so cheap. And I go, mate, you got it at the auction because the owner knows. But it hasn't been disclosed because it hadn't had to be disclosed because you only have to disclose what the building has disclosed. So buying through auction is probably one of the worst things for purchasers. And then on the vendor side, it's not as good as well because it also scares off a lot of buyers because they don't want to go unconditional. So it's sort of like, it's a really interesting, this market's really interesting. So if I was a person going to purchase, you want to be purchasing with conditions. And conditions that enable you to do the due diligence you need. And if there's no issues, the agent should have no problem with putting the conditions in there, nor should the vendor. And that's really, if the vendor goes, I don't want you to do a condition on a building report, well, that's telling you something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So guys, especially when you're dealing with everybody, even if it looks really good on surface, on paper, come in and make sure you've got the conditions in there. And from an agent's point of view, people don't like conditions, but if there's no problems with the building, conditions are great. And I use them all the time because they're needed. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a happy buyer at the end of the table, you're not going to get repeat business, are you?
Yeah, so I think that's something I've never really thought of, I suppose, as far as the options go. With apartments, there are a few more things to check out, so yeah, better do it as a normal sale with conditions.
Mm. Oh, 100%. I would not buy an auction unless if I know it inside out, and I suppose I can to a degree because I know the market inside out, and I can go and ring the people I need to ring and go, what's going on here? And yeah, but even I can get caught out sometimes.
Yeah,
So
no,
it just,
it's not hard. We all learn every day on it. I can vouch for that.
But apartments are a very safe purchase as long as you go through that purchase with your eyes wide open and having the conditions that enable you to get the visibility you need. And without that, it can be risky, but there is so much money to be made in this industry. This market, that's why I love it, is because it has been underperforming for years and it's only started performing recently. When I was selling them in 2010, every person in all the papers were saying, don't buy an apartment, it's the worst thing you can do. Well, look how much they've gone up. Look at the returns. They're fantastic. And it's still going.
So, Andrew, just carrying on with the leaky home issue of apartments, is I suppose there's different developers. There's a lot of developers around Auckland who are building over the last 10, 20 years, building after building, I guess. And I suppose the history, whether it's good or bad, follows those developers. Would that be a accurate statement?
It's a debatable statement, yes. There are some developers where I've seen one building go and then the next one, and I've got another one and I'm just waiting for that one to go. So statistically, I would say keep away from it. Then I've seen developers where they've maybe done 10 or 12 and one was a leaker and they learnt from it. So the key thing is looking at the materials of the cladding. If you're dealing with a developer that's had a leaky building, was the materials or was the design similar? So it's hard to talk about this because I don't really want to talk about names and because they wouldn't have done attention. But it's looking at, okay, you can tell that developer and you're looking at that building and it's leaky and you're looking at the next one and all the checks have told you it's fine. Do they look similar? For example, do they have the same kind of cladding, which is basically what's on the outside of your building? Or do they have do the balconies look the same? Are they the same kind of design? And that kind of thing can give you a little bit of insight. Because around that period, if a developer puts them up pretty quickly, like one after another, they probably use the same building materials. And that's where a lot of problems happen because people use building materials, they got them over from overseas, from China and the like, where it was all about the bottom dollar, the bottom line and doing as cheap as possible. And yes, they were told it was great, but it's, it hasn't been. So, yeah. Which actually leads me on to then one question you may want to ask is the character apartment side, which has had a little bit of negative publicity. And the reason why I thought about it was because I had developers say to me, we're going to actually try to market that character apartments aren't that great because they're in high demand to help push business towards off the plans, which is an interesting comment when I heard it because you have this earthquake rating coming out. Now, I don't know if you want to go into that, because would you like me to go into the whole...
Yeah, just touch on that for a little bit on the earthquake.
Just very, very briefly. Basically, when you have a character apartment, basically it gets what's an IEP, which is an initial evaluation procedure, which means which is what the earthquake rating is. And the council does that, a brushstroke approach, which is not actually even going into without the plans they have on file, which aren't always correct. So they go in and so if you come at 33% or below, that means you don't pass, which means you've got 15 years to strengthen your building, and as if you're a character A, which means you've got 25%, which means you're a dual-worth building, you're a building of huge significance within Auckland. Yep. So now the situation is the debate on that sort of tarnished a lot of character apartments. Now, character apartments can never be built again because they're high starred, they'll be too expensive to build. So if you're above that 40% mark, you're pretty safe. If you're above that 50%, you're extremely safe. So just be aware of that it's only a few of those character buildings, and there's actually some opportunities there. If you've got an IEP rating or an earthquake rating that's around about sort of 28, 30, there's a chance that you could raise that quite easily. and with the values raise it as well. So there's some money to be made in that market as well, but just a bit more research. Anyway, next question.
No, good, and that's quite relevant to a lot of people outside the Auckland area, especially Wellington and Christchurch and Dunedin, for example. I mean, that's another story again, I guess. But
well, there's a lot of easy ways to actually raise it. The first IEP that the council comes out with is just a brushstroke, and you get the actual engineer in there to do another IEP. And if anybody wants to go through that, I can explain. I did it in my own building, and took it from 35 to 55, and obviously the values flowed with that. And then there's certain procedures you can go to do that, but that's quite specific. So if anybody wants to talk about that, just let me know.
No, all good. In fact, just going back to what you were saying before about what the question sort of I asked with history of developers, I suppose it just becomes important if you're buying a brand new apartment or apartment off the plan, do some research on the developer.
Yeah, I think that with the current, I suppose, what's happened in the past, I think buying off the plans and them going leaky, I don't think it's going to be as much of a problem because of the regulations that have been put in place, because of what's occurred in the past. I think it's more looking at off the plan and going, actually, what are you buying here? How big are these units? What's the resale of these units? What's the cost if I bought this in the secondary market, i.e. what's already built? What's the difference here? And looking around it and going, okay, can it be built out? Can I lose these views that I'm paying a huge premium for? And, the big one is size. If you're buying off the plans, make sure they're big. If they're not, you're going to lose money because I guarantee that they'll come out in the market and they'll be selling below what they sold off the plans for. So there's a few up there off the plans that I think are worth buying. I'd consider buying them. And I never thought I'd say that, but it's because they're bringing out quality stock. But the majority, I'm sorry, just crap.
All good.
I know it's not the word I should use, but they're crap.
Yeah, it's all good. Hey, right from your point of view, you're in the middle of it right as we speak. We've got investors listening. What's a good yield for an investor in Auckland right now, gross and net? And again, it's very subjective, obviously.
Okay.
What sort of in size place do they have to buy to get that gross and net yield?
Okay, so net's all that matters. Gross doesn't mean anything, especially with apartments.
Especially
You've got
apartments.
body fees and all that kind of thing. So net's the only figure we care about. So it depends on, again, which position you're in. If you're looking for capital gain, just cover the mortgage and a little bit more. So, if you're getting a 6 to 7% return, you should be very, very happy. Even down to 5, because it's paying for itself. You've probably put in a deposit, so you're covered, and you're going to get a huge amount of capital gain in that 2-bedroom car park. If you're coming with cash, well, you're winning both ways. If you're going down to your investor stock, so that's your under 40 square metres, you want to be looking to around about 7 to 8% there. What people don't understand is, though, if they come in and they buy with 50%, and they can actually leverage their return more so, because it's how much of their money are they using.
Yeah.
So bearing in mind that it's not always on the purchase price, it's on the money you put in and on getting your money to work for you the most you can. So often someone can come in, I'll have somebody who can buy an apartment fully cash, and I'll go, I tell you what, mate, why don't you use the bank's money here and actually increase your return rather than using all your money.
There's a lot of ways to set up your structure, and you can actually use your apartment by paying 50% or whatever on, just to actually start building your portfolio other places also. Okay, right. We'll be new investors here right now listening. So if you have any advice for an investor wanting to start out in the apartment market, what would you recommend they do? Apart from obviously come and see you, I guess.
2 bedrooms and a car.
2 bedrooms and a car. That's it. Simple. That's it.
Okay. The thing is it depends again the yield stuff and return. That's pretty obvious. The numbers you're talking. I don't need to talk to you about that, other than doing your due diligence. Now, but that market, I don't think it's going to move as much in the capital gain side because the rates increase. It's completely goes down to what are your outgoings, and your outgoings are changing with CPI, with the body corporate fee, and the rates increasing, and so that means rents have to increase. Now, so I don't see a huge amount of capital gain in there, but there's a purpose for that kind of investment. Now, if you're in there for capital gain and what I call an okay return, because in apartments I think we're spoiled, but is walk into that apartment. Okay, maybe a bit difficult. Okay, if you're above 60 square metres, so the bigger the better. 2-bedroom in the CBD or 2-bedroom with a car in the fringes, you're going to be laughing in 3 years' time, okay, or 2 years' time.
Great work. Before we wrap it up, any final comments you'd like to make? Or?
This market's probably about halfway through, and it's all selling below replacement cost. You can't not move. That's where I'd put my money. It's a bit of a no-brainer, but the due diligence part is important.
Right, absolutely. Hey, Andrew, it's been awesome chatting. I spoke to you last week, finally, in person, and realised you were very passionate and knowledgeable about apartments, and the other sort of people end up on these podcasts with us. So it's been a phenomenal amount of knowledge you've given people. There's a massive amount to look at when you do buy an apartment and to what to research, but at the same time there is real opportunity, and probably a little bit more opportunity than people maybe thought also. So hey, thanks for your time today. I know you're a busy man. I'd really like to thank Andrew for his time with this interview. He has certainly taught us that there is much to learn and consider when purchasing apartments. We hope you've enjoyed this interview. If you have any topics or anyone you'd like to see interviewed, please let us know. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have an outstanding day.